Ever since they won control of the government in 2016, Republicans have been obsessed with getting this one thing done.
Tax reform.
Tax reform.
Tax reform.
Tax reform.
We're going to have a phenomenal tax reform.
They've passed a bill, the president has signed it, so let's break down what's actually going to change.
Why would Republicans want to pass this bill so bad? Well, maybe it has something to do with the fact that in 2014, the United States had the third highest marginal corporate income tax rate in the world at 39.1%, which is exceeded only by Chad and the United Arab Emirates. The worldwide average for this tax is 22.6%, and in Europe, it's just 18.6%. But Vox wants to make this a huge deal, especially about the cost of it to the government, despite the fact that the corporate tax only makes up 9% of the federal revenue each year.
Imagine that instead of getting paid in dollars, you got paid in cereal. The government takes a certain amount of cereal in taxes, and it uses it to pay other people to do things, like build roads, fly fighter jets, do research. You get the picture. The more you earn, the bigger the share of your cereal the government takes. Sometimes the government wants to incentivize you to do certain things with your cereal, like if you buy a house for 100 pieces of cereal and then sell it for 200 pieces of cereal, you'd normally have to pay capital gains taxes on that profit. But there's a special loophole that says you don't have to. The tax code is full of loopholes like this, which means if everyone puts their cereal together, there'd be two bowls. One that the government dips into for taxes, and one it doesn't. Now, Republicans want the government to take a smaller portion, and they say they want people to keep more of the cereal. But if they do that, the government won't have enough cereal to pay for what it needs. So part of this new law is taking some of the cereal that's not taxed and change the rules so that it is taxable. That way, the government can take a smaller share of the cereal, but still pay for the stuff it needs. This is what politicians mean when they talk about broadening the tax base. Here's the problem. Republicans aren't broadening the base enough. They're taking a lot less cereal from people and adding some new taxable cereal, but not enough to pay for what the government needs. To pay for that stuff, the government is going to have to go into debt. This means they're going to have to take even more cereal years in the future to pay back the debt they're taking out now.
The government already doesn't have enough cereal because they massively overspend each year, despite the fact that in 2016 we still held over 24% of the world's GDP and only 4.4% of the world's population. The 1.5 trillion number Vox refers to is from the Joint Committee of Taxation, but what they didn't tell you is that that number is over the next 10 years. It should also be noted that the cost of the bill goes down each year, as people should have more money and should spend more money, which in turn goes back into the government's pockets and will eventually leave them with the same revenue, if not more revenue, than they had before the tax plan. All while giving the people and corporations more money to spend and save. Most of the cost of the 1.5 trillion does not even come from the corporate rate. It comes from the slight decrease in the individual income tax. The reason? Because the income tax, not the corporate tax, makes up over 47% of federal revenue each year.
Republicans think this will help grow the total amount of cereal available to both taxpayers and the government. So what happens to that $1.5 trillion gap? It goes back into people's bowls, but not everyone gets the same share. If you break the population into 5 equally sized groups based on how much they earned in 2017, and look at how much each group will earn in 2018, every group does get a tax cut, but fast forward 10 years, and you can see that lower and middle class Americans will actually pay more since their tax cuts aren't permanent. And if you break that top group into smaller groups, you can see the very wealthiest benefit most of all. So while this new law does close some loopholes to bring in new tax revenue, the bill's larger purpose is to realize the Republican vision of a fairer tax code, one in which the wealthiest pay a lot less.
The reason why the lower class will see a decrease in the money they bring home after 10 years is because that's when the freaking income tax bill expires. And just like the upper class, the lower class also got a tax cut. At this point, Vox is basically lying to their audience to help push their narrative. But Vox is right. The corporate tax rate doesn't expire in 10 years, but this will only affect a very small amount of business owners who are corporations. Most of the upper class will see their taxes hiked back up to 39.6% in 10 years as well, just like the middle and lower class will see their taxes hiked back up as well. I also don't see the issue with a fair tax plan. I make twice what you make, so I pay double what you do in taxes.